Well, I'm of the opinion that we are actually animals, which I don't think anybody would dispute. And just like your dog or your cat has a particular nature and certain patterns of behavior, so do we. We're a lot more complicated, but our behavior fits into certain patterns because we evolved a particular way going back hundreds of thousands of years ago. So I'm fascinated by these elements in our nature that have not changed since the beginning of time. And I wanted to sort of explore that and illuminate it for people out there because I think a lot of people look, the most important skill you can develop in life is understanding people. We're a social animal. All the technical brilliance in the world won't get you very far if you are really inept in dealing with people. And I'm sure that's extremely important with real estate agents,
Yeah.
right? It's a people business. And I know because I've dealt with several. We fired our first real estate agent because she did not understand our taste. She didn't listen to us. She started showing us houses that had nothing to do with who we were. She wasn't attuned to us. So my point in my book was this is the most important life skill you can develop. It's the ability to understand the people around you and to understand yourself and to know what motivates human behavior. It's not necessarily what you think. A lot of our nature is slightly negative. We have certain faults and certain proclivities, such as how emotions govern our behavior. So if you understand something very basic, like the fact that people aren't really thinking animals, they're emotional animals, they feel before they think, that kind of alters how you will approach them. So I wanted to completely alter your way of looking at the people around you and make them much more transparent. I wanted to explore some of the dark side in human nature because I think it's very real.
Yeah.
And we've all dealt with people who are extremely difficult and have obviously some psychological problems, and they can make our lives miserable because we get entangled in their emotional dramas and we don't have any distance. So a lot of the book focuses on traits that are like that, but we tend to see them as something that only other people have. So I have a chapter on narcissism, and I
Yeah.
want to make it clear to you out there that you are a narcissist as well. So it's not so important for you to be labeling other people. It's a human trait. We are all self-absorbed, you included. There's a scale. Some people are much more self-absorbed than others and they have a problem, but you are the same way. So let's be a little more realistic and a little more humble about it. So if you can come to terms with the fact that you are also very self-absorbed, you can begin to change that dynamic. You can begin to become more empathetic, more attuned to other people, only once you realize that you are not really like that. And I did the same thing with the chapter on aggression. It's always the other person who's aggressive. I'm always,
Oh yeah.
I
I'm
have
never
the
aggressive.
best intentions. I'm an angel. It's not true. We all have aggressive tendencies. How do you channel your aggression? Do you turn it inward into kind of hating yourself and taking drugs and things to escape? Do you turn it into being vicious and pushing people around? Do you become passive aggressive? Or do you turn it into your work and make it something productive, something that actually contributes to society? So, I could go on and on. There's a trait about what makes us a social animal and how a lot of our thoughts and feelings are not our own. They come from the people around us. We are extremely susceptible to the emotions of the people around us. So I want to change your concept of who you are. You're not as much of an individual as you think you are. You are much more vulnerable to the influences of people. Well, this is part of the nature that I'm going back to early on in our evolution. So when we were evolving, well before the invention of language, we were a very weak animal compared to all of the predators out there in East Africa. But what the one strength we had was our ability to function within a group and understand people before the invention of language. But part of that was we develop kind of complex emotions. We have a much greater range of emotions than other animals do. We feel pity, we feel shame, we feel gratitude. And these emotions showed up on the face and were a form of communication to other people. But what it meant was, in the group setting of our earliest ancestors, part of our need to survive was being swept up in group emotions. If the group could feel anger or fear because there was a predator in the environment, then the whole group could bond together. And so, we can go into the neuroscience of this, but we are, by our nature, extremely susceptible to the moods and motions of the people around us. And I talk in the book, if you go to like a rock concert, or you hear some speech by, somebody that you really love, some political candidate, you notice that the whole crowd gets swept up in a kind of viral emotion of enthusiasm and excitement, and you feel differently. You feel like you're one with everyone else. And it's a kind of emotion you don't feel when there's just 3 or 4 people around you. That's how these kind of viral emotions can sweep you up. And so, I remember several years ago, I went to give a talk at Microsoft up in Seattle area. And here's a place of 30,000 people. And what struck me was how similar they all looked. They all dressed the same. They all had the same mannerisms. They were all kind of ordering the same food. They had, it was not so obvious, but it was very much something noticeable. And that's because there's a culture at Microsoft. It comes from Bill Gates, and everybody was following it. Everybody was swept up into this and felt the need to kind of present themselves as a mini Bill Gates. Well, that goes on in your office or any culture that you're involved in. People feel the need to fit in, to look like other people, to have the same vocal patterns. You're not aware of this, but unconsciously, you're continually becoming infected by the moods and ideas and emotions of the people around you. One of the things that I think is sort of really relevant to what you just said is I'm really a big believer in nonverbal communication. As a police officer, you probably had to learn that that's what made you think certain people were standing out. We humans communicate an incredible percentage of our emotions and what's going on in our heads non-verbally. And as a real estate agent, that can be a real mind opener for you. So people may say something, they may verbalize certain desires or wishes, but it's not necessarily the truth. We all tend to wear a mask when we're in society. We try and present our best side to people. But beneath the mask, we're giving off all kinds of signs of what's really going on. And I'm trying to ground you in this other language that humans speak, which is not verbally, it's nonverbal. And I want you to the reason I'm emphasizing this is a way to kind of ground you in my book. I want you to be much more observant of people than you are. Normally you go through life and you're not observing anything. You're constantly listening to yourself. You're not paying attention to the tension in people's faces, to the fake smiles they're giving you, to the moments when their eyes really light up and the smile is genuine and describes real emotion that's going on, into the kind of body language that reveals that this person actually doesn't really like you. They feel kind of some negative energy. I want you to kind of master this nonverbal language and sort of teach yourself how to become a superior observer of people, first by kind of paying deep, deep attention to their nonverbal behavior. And then after that, we can go deeper into other things that you can look at, such as the patterns of behavior that people reveal and their actions and what that shows. But I wanted you to understand that in every detail of people's lives, their nonverbal stuff, the kind of people they choose for a spouse, how they treat other employees around them, how they treat those who work for them, their staff, how they treat their children, all of this are indications of who they really are. So don't get lost in people's appearances and what they present to you as a client, but try and be attuned to what's going on behind the surface. I read about micro expressions. I don't know if people understand that concept, but basically scientists discovered sometime in the 60s that people give out an expression that only lasts for like a quarter of a second, a look of disgust, a look of excitement, and then they quickly hide it because they don't want people to realize what's going on. And I want you to become aware of that. So sometimes when you come approach somebody a stranger or someone who you haven't seen for a while, and you come at them from an angle so that you sort of surprise them, you can catch in that instant a look, that micro expression of excitement. They're genuinely excited to see you, or kind of like, oh, get away, I don't really want to see you. And they quickly cover it up with one of their fake smiles. Yep. These are other kinds of things like your shoes pointed, which is really an excellent observation.
Thanks. So let's say that somebody is at a meeting with other investors and they're trying to get people's attention so that when someone has a deal, they bring it to them first. And they don't really know exactly how to go about making these connections. They're talking to somebody and they're getting all these negative signs. They're recognizing his shoes are pointed the other way. I'm getting a fake smile. Their eyes are darting away from me. Like, what's an escape route I could get away from here? Can you give us some ideas of what that person can do to turn that interaction around and make themselves more interesting or more valuable to the person that they're speaking to?
Well, it usually is something where you don't want to get in that position in the first place. So you want to understand that the energy that you present people is how they're going to see you. So if you're feeling defensive and insecure, remember we were talking about how susceptible we are to the emotions of people around us. If you approach that client initially and you're kind of feeling insecure and defensive, they're going to feel that. They may not consciously register, but they're going to react in a way that makes them slightly defensive and slightly negative and slightly worried about you. We've all had that experience of being around insecure people. They make us feel insecure and nervous.
Yeah.
As when you're around somebody who's confident and open, it tends to, communicate itself to us and we open ourselves up. So you want to be able to understand that your attitude and your energy is going to infect the people that you approach, and you want to approach them differently. You don't want to be thinking of yourself and thinking, do they like me? Do I look good? Am I going to say the right things? You want to be focusing your energy on them. Think of it yourself. How many times during a day do you ever feel that someone has come up to you and actually made you feel better about yourself, validated some aspect of your character that needed that kind of validation? Not just flattery, but that made you feel that you are actually an intelligent person, that you're actually a good person, that you actually have decent ideas. It's extremely rare. Most people are so self-absorbed, they're not paying any attention to you. If you can give that client just a millisecond of the feeling that you're actually attuned to them, that you're actually noticing the good parts of their character and bringing it out, they will open up like a flower in front of you. I'm sorry to be so new agey here, but it's because you're giving them defensive, insecure, negative, neurotic, worried energy that they're going to react this way. So I have a chapter about people's self-opinion, which is probably the most important chapter for you real estate agent people out there. It's really the chapter about how to have influence over people. And it means the people you are dealing with have an opinion about themselves. They think that they are good and decent and moral. They think that they're intelligent about something, whatever that is. They feel that they have good ideas, that they're an independent person. You want to validate that. You want to make them feel stronger about these ideas about themselves. You don't want to challenge their self-opinion. You don't want to make them feel defensive or insecure. You want to confirm them and validate them and give them the kind of attention that they're not getting from their spouse or their children or their boss. If you just put those three principles in practice, that whole game alters. And what I mean is your attitude and your energy, how you approach people, getting into their mindset and attending to them and confirming and validating their self-opinion, I think that's kind of a game changer.
That is gold. I mean, if you can do that well, what happens is people that you're interacting with in that way, they don't necessarily cognitively realize that's what you just did. What they feel is this emotional experience of, I like him, he makes me feel good. You're at top of mind. They naturally want to help you. They want to stay in communication. They want to bring you that deal because it's an excuse to talk to you and you make them feel good.
Yeah.
And this is something I run into all the time, both with the agents on my team and the people who come to me and say, David, how do I get the deal before the next guy does? They think they need to understand the contract better. They think they need to understand numbers, and that just doesn't matter. You get the deal when people like you more. You make them feel good. You fill them with confidence that when you say I'll buy it, you're actually going to buy it. Now, they don't have to worry about looking like a butthead to the guy who they said, well, I'll find a buyer for the deal. It's that ability to influence people's emotions that really makes them make decisions. And man, what you just said was so, so good. And I mean, you've interviewed tons of people who are very, very successful. You've studied success, and you're confirming this is what successful people do better. They're not necessarily the smartest. They don't know the most. They know how to tune into other people and make it about them.
Right. And you also don't want to make it all feel like it's about money, like it's all mercenary. You want to make it seem like it's a relationship that you're building, and it shouldn't be fake. You actually do enjoy people. If you're a real estate agent and you don't like people, you're in trouble. So you have to actually like people. And even someone who's kind of miserable and who kind of has a negative energy, find a way to see something that you can like and appreciate in them. So the sense that you actually like people and that you want to develop these relationships is extremely important, because if you're someone who feels kind of insecure and is sort of doesn't like relationships and prefers playing video games, you're never going to develop these skills. You have to really love this. You really have to want it. And the person that who ended up selling our house some 15 years ago was really a master at this game. He was really kind and empathetic. And when we just had to explain to him a few things about what we were looking for, and we could tell immediately from the first houses he showed us that he understood our taste and our mindset. He wasn't focused on himself and making the deal. He was really attending to us and what we were thinking. Well, I'm not totally against flattery. Flattery has its place. We're all vulnerable to it. I just think you need to be very strategic when it comes to flattery. So one thing that I talk about it in the book is flatter people about the thing that no one else is flattering them about, what they feel genuinely insecure. So you don't flatter Michael Jordan about what a great basketball player he is. You flatter him about what a smart business person he is, although he isn't a very smart business. It isn't like what you say directly to validate a person. You don't go up to them and say, damn it, Robert, I think you're a really moral, wonderful, nice person. It's fake. It's a feeling you give them. The feeling, because I said most of the communication between people is nonverbal. The sense that you feel comfortable in their presence and that you like them is enough. It speaks louder than any words. Imagine like your closest friend in the world, your best buddy. When you meet that person, there's an instant connection. Your eyes lit up. You're happy to see each other, right? And it's a nice feeling because it's sort of that narcissism thing I'm talking about. Their smile on their face when they see you makes you feel like, well, I'm a good person because they reacted to me positively. You can give that same feeling. It doesn't have to be so intense with a client. By the fact that you feel happy to be in their presence, they will feel that. And that's much better than any kind of words that you could express. Well, it's in a chapter where I try and make the point that we're not rational animals. We think that we are this thinking, rational, kind of algorithmic animal, like a computer, but actually emotions govern us and we're very irrational. And we have biases in our thinking patterns that reveal underlying emotions. So confirmation bias is obviously the most obvious one and the one that we all have, myself included. And it means that when we look for evidence to support our ideas, we look for the evidence that will do that. We don't look for evidence or anecdotes that might disconfirm our ideas. We tend to look on those websites that we feel comfortable will confirm what we already believe. On Facebook, we have an echo chamber where everybody has the same opinions that we do. And that's because we don't want to actually confront the fact that maybe our ideas are wrong. We want to feel them confirmed. And so, people will hold an idea and then what actually happens in the world will show that their idea was really wrong, but they will still hold on to that initial idea because they don't want to feel like they were unintelligent or were stupid. So we're definitely have a bias, a tendency to hold on to those ideas that we're emotionally attached to. I talk about the conviction bias. We tend to feel that when somebody is really expresses a strong opinion with lots of emotion and lots of sincerity, that it must be true what they're saying. We can't imagine the fact that someone who uses a lot of conviction and emotion with a loud voice is actually a con artist, could actually be lying, could actually be deceiving, could actually be covering up all of their insecurities by trying to appear extremely strong with their opinions. So when you see someone out there who's extremely vociferous and extremely certain about their ideas, you can be sure that the opposite is probably going on, and you should be very dubious about them. So there's the conviction bias. The appearance bias is that if someone appears to be a decent person, they must be so inside. If someone appears to be a little rough and aggressive, they could be a thug or a criminal. I did a book. One of my fourth book was with 50 Cent. I don't know if you knew about that, called The 50th Law.
Yep.
And, you know, his appearance, I was intimidated when I first met him. He's like the quintessential thug. But it's all show, it's all theater, it's all a mask. Yep. Behind that mask, he's actually a really sweet, gentle person, believe it or not. So people's appearances are very deceptive, but we tend to judge them by what we see. That's another bias. The group bias is that we tend to to entertain the same ideas as everybody else in our group. I mean, you'll look at something like in politics, and if you belong to the Democratic Party, which I happen to, so that's just to get that out of the way, you'll notice that everybody who's a Democrat go down the line of 20 different ideas or policy issues. They all agree. They all have the same opinion. They can't disagree about one thing, because then that might be they're not pure enough. They're not morally pure. They're not righteous. So we are completely swept up in the ideas of the group. On and on and on. These biases exist in us unconsciously, and they sway all of our emotions. You know, they have a thing in marketing. They call it the affect heuristic. And what that means is people buy things not based on rational thought processes, but on purely emotion. And they've done millions of studies about these emotional biases that make people choose certain products over others. So I just wanted to get you over the notion that people are these rational thinking animals, whereas instead they're riddled with these biases. And once you know that you have this bias, you can begin to maybe work against it. The thing you want to look at is their track record. The track record never lies. So if you see reviews or you hear from other people that they did a shoddy job on this one job, you can be sure that they've probably done it many times, several times. You want to do some research and find out their track record, because what their actions in the past will speak more eloquently than anything you could judge on in the present.
Nobody wants to be the villain in their own story.
As I said, we're social animals. So you pick the wrong business partner to in your startup, and you're doomed. Your life is going to be, they'll steal it from you. You pick the wrong spouse just because they're pretty or whatever, and they end up being a gold digger or something else like that. Your life can be ruined, on and on and on. So the people you choose to work with or live with, these are all critical decisions. And you want to base it not on what you see, not on the front they present, but on their character, on who they really are underneath the surface. Yeah, I talk in the irrationality chapter about increasing your reaction time. So when you're coming up with an important decision, step back and don't hire that person. Don't make that decision. Don't buy that product. Sleep on it. Wait another day or two and think, and don't simply react. So if you're about to take that person on as a tenant because they're charming and they were smiling and they seem very pleasant, and you're impetuous, yeah, great, let's do it. Train yourself. You're like an athlete. You train yourself slowly to never react in the moments, and always give yourself an extra day to think about it and try and assume, am I attracted to this shopping cart because of, certain external factors? Have I done my research? Have I actually looked at what they've done in the past? Don't react in the moment, but step back.
Mm.
We're visual animals. That's a known fact. Vision is like our primary sense. And so we're very attuned to, life is very complicated and chaotic and messy. And we're all kind of overwhelmed by information. And that person who can present things clearly and simply with a graphic and make the idea very clear as to why you need to buy this has got a huge, huge advantage. So yeah, I definitely buy that. That's part of the appearance bias. I talk a lot about that in my other books, in The Art of Seduction and in the 48 Laws of Power, the importance of creating the right kind of spectacle for people, using the right colors, understand the psychology of colors, understand, the simplicity of your presentation, and pay extremely important attention to any kind of visual. And that includes like the clothes that you wear when you're interacting with your client. If you showed up, at least here in LA, wearing flip-flops and shorts and to go look at a house, I might not be so impressed.
What I found is that if I didn't dress up, I could eventually get the client to listen to me, but it was a lot of work to convince them that I was worth listening to. Whereas when I show up in a suit, man, you just make it so much easier on yourself to get their attention and their respect, and they hear what you're saying. And that was one of the things I just gave up and said, like, I just need to play by the rules of the other person. If this is what they value, then it helps my cause to go along with it. And I got over my need to be an individual. And well, I don't want to have to do that. Why should I have to dress up just for this? That's not who I am. I had to stop thinking about me and who I am and start thinking about them. And I feel like that subconsciously gets conveyed to the other person, that you're more trustworthy because they can tell you're operating in a way that makes them feel more comfortable, not yourself.
Yeah, I mean, of course, if you're selling something in the Haight-Ashbury, maybe wearing a suit wouldn't be appropriate.
Right.
So you have to kind of tailor it a little bit to the area that you're working in, and maybe that day you wear some torn jeans or something. But basically, being attuned to the tastes and what will appeal to your client is extremely important. And so your clothes and how you present yourself and then the visuals that you present them are extremely, extremely important.
We see this a lot on social media right now. You get to really control the way that you show yourself to the world. And for people building a real estate business, they want to flip houses, they want to buy rentals, whatever. If your page doesn't look professional, if it looks like it's very shoddy or you have a lot of inappropriate stuff on there, it doesn't matter how smart you are. People are not going to trust you with a big investment.
Right, because it's so easy nowadays to design something that's simple and pleasant to look at. So, we're obviously going to tune out those things that are messy, mostly because, as I said, our lives are so complicated and we're so overwhelmed with things that just seeing something laid out pleasantly and well thought out is just a relief to our eyes and our senses.
Oren Klaff talks about that in his book, Pitch Anything, how the brain is always afraid. It's always looking for how it's going to be taken advantage of or hurt in some way. And so you got to work really hard to show people that you're not going to hurt them and why you're actually looking to help them. And for me, if I just see something that isn't clearly articulated and you're making me work to figure out what you're even trying to say, I'm done and I'm on to the next thing. And that's why a guy like Ryan Holiday stands out so much, because he gives you this other feeling like, oh, he's not making life harder. He's making it easier. How can I get him more involved in what I'm doing? And then Ryan learns a ton from you and he learns a ton from Tucker, and he becomes very, very successful much faster than other people because he's endeared himself. I want to ask you one thing, Robert. I really, really liked your book on mastery and the point you made in your speech at Oxford about Leonardo da Vinci and how he was so committed to what he was passionate about and just threw himself into it. We get a lot of people who look to real estate to kind of become this, I wouldn't say a get-rich-quick scheme, but they're definitely looking for it to be their way out of a situation they don't like. I don't like my job, so I want to buy rental properties and live off the rent. And they're hoping in 3 to 5 years they can accomplish that. With your study on mastering how it works, what advice do you have for people who are under those kind of expectations?
Well, it can work for a while. You can kind of trick yourself. You can go become a lawyer or a real estate agent for the money. because, and I'm nothing against money. It's very nice to have money, but the problem is that if you're not connected to it emotionally, to your work, if you're just doing it for the money, then you're going to burn yourself out. You only really learn, you only really get better at something when you want to learn, when you feel connected to it emotionally. I always give the example of when I was in college, I learned French. I studied French for 4 years. And then I went to Paris and I couldn't speak one word. And then I met a French girl and I wanted, to have a relationship. In 2 weeks, I learned more than I ever learned in 4 years because I was motivated. I really wanted to learn. So when you want to learn, you're going to learn a lot faster than if you're just doing it for other reasons. And doing it just for the money isn't exciting enough, isn't really going to make you motivated, isn't going to make you get up in the morning for 5 or 10 years and go, wow, I want to, I can get better at this. Because you always need to improve your skills. I don't care how long you've been doing something for. So you need to be emotionally attached to what you're doing. In real estate, there's certain things that are extremely pleasurable, and you have to be attracted. You have to emphasize those things. So the idea that you are meeting and interacting with always a group of people, different people with different needs. I say in my new book that you have to alter your approach to people. Mostly you think you're self-absorbed because you think you're the most interesting person in the world, and you only want to think about your own thoughts because that's, that what could be more interesting than my world. But I want you to change and think that the people you're dealing with are actually really, really interesting. Even the most boring person that you've ever met in your life, they have some kind of experience, something in their childhood, something that's interesting, something you can learn from. So if you approach real estate as this is a people business and people are interesting, and over the course of 10 years, I'm going to meet hundreds of really interesting, different, strange, weird people. And man, I'm going to learn from them. I'm going to learn about psychology. That's an exciting way to approach it. Also, you have to have a love for architecture and homes. I happen to be, as a writer, I'm very curious about people's homes and how they live in their homes and their domestic situation and what goes on behind the door and the curtains. And that kind of voyeurism sort of makes me excited to, would make me, I think would fuel my interest in becoming a real estate agent. So you actually have to love the idea of a home itself and what that means and what that represents to people. On and on. You have to find emotional connections to your work. Otherwise, if it's purely mercenary, you're going to burn out. You're going to start becoming addicted to porn and taking drugs and everything. You won't be able to last in it.
The other side of that coin is being honest with yourself to recognize this is the part of the job that I like. So I know from my personality, I love real estate. I bought a whole bunch of rental property. I flip houses, and then I became an agent so I could share what I learned with people that mattered to me. But I know there's also parts of the job I don't love. Right. I don't love the paperwork. I don't love when my clients just want to ramble on and on for 45 minutes about what color they want to paint the wall in the kitchen, right? I have to do it, but it doesn't energize me. So I hired people that love that stuff, and I have them do that part. My assistant, Krista's wonderful. She'll listen to you talk about paint for 45 minutes and have you feeling like the best thing ever, right? And it saves me from being drained from that. I like to focus on protecting people's money. Like the police officer side of me wants to protect and serve your interests in a real estate transaction, which is one of the reasons why I'm excelling there is I just understood I like this and I don't like that. And there's a lot of investors out there that they just don't have the courage, or they don't understand that if you like to analyze properties, but you don't love to meet people, find someone who does love to meet people, or vice versa. If you love people, but you're just not comfortable with numbers, be honest with yourself and say, I don't like this area. I'm going to avoid it, or I'm not going to excel at it. Let me hire someone, or let me partner with someone who's a really good analyst who is passionate about it, and then drill down on the thing you're really good at. And I always point out our partner here, Brandon, is so good at marketing. The guy's brain just sees angles to market something that mine would never, ever see in a million years. And it comes to him naturally. He's very humble, so he doesn't put himself out there as a good marketer, but he's really, really good at it. Because he loves it, he's always excelling in that area. He's learning new stuff. He's getting it from other masters, and he's teaching other people. And he shies away from the stuff he's not as good at. And when I read you, Robert, or when I hear you speaking about this, I notice that theme comes up a lot. Is it's not just tactically what makes the most sense. You have to understand that emotions play a very big role in how successful you're going to be. And the wiser you are at connecting them, the better your business is going to be.
Yeah, that's very well put. In Mastery, and I also have a chapter on this in the new book. I talk about understanding yourself and being aware of who you are and what makes you different, and knowing your own tastes and inclinations, and what excites you and what bores the hell out of you. And a lot of people lose touch with that. It's not just simply that they try and excel at things that they're not good at. They don't really know what they like. They don't really know that this is what their strengths are. And I want you to be more self-aware and to go look at yourself. The first step towards becoming good at anything is to know who you are, what excites you, what you're attracted to, and what you're repulsed about. I knew from early on when I was 22 or so, and I worked starting early on in like journalism, that I hated this job. I don't like working with people. I don't like political jobs where I'm really an entrepreneur at heart. I like working for myself. I like to control what I do, So it's also knowing what you don't like and what you're not good at, because you can't be good at everything. And we'll come back to this one simple idea. When you love what you're doing, you are motivated to learn and to excel and to improve yourself. You will learn at a much higher rate than if you're just going through the motions. And so if you understand that one basic principle, that will change how you operate. Yeah. You will try and gear yourself toward focusing on those skills and those things that genuinely connect to you as an individual. I mean, within reason, you have to make a living and you have to make money. And there are always going to be things and tasks that you don't like. And maybe you can delegate them, but maybe you have to do them yourself, But generally, if you don't feel emotionally connected to your work, you're gonna face a lot of problems down the road. I don't know. I love thinking in terms of strategy. And that's sort of been something that is a focus of a lot of my books.
Yeah.
So I'm big. I'm really heavily into Asian strategy books. So I have an annotated version of Sun Tzu's Art of War, which sort of explains in modern terms what he's talking about. I find that extremely brilliant and helpful in business sense. I know there's something else out there that I haven't mentioned. In fact, I know there's a recent book. Is his name Ray Diallo?
Yeah, Principles. Ray Dalio.
Sorry, thank you. That was a very good book. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
So I could recommend that.
Perfect.
Okay. How about some of your hobbies?
Also, Ryan Holiday's books.
Oh, yes. Ryan Holiday.
Obstacle is the Way would be excellent. Sorry, about my hobbies. Well, I'm a exercise freak. So, recently I suffered a stroke about 4.5 months ago. So I'm recovering from that. But prior to it, every day I would either swim or mountain bike or do kind of a Pilates routine. So for my stressful life, just kind of constantly moving and not sitting around all the time. But swimming, I find the most meditative thing that will get me out of my mind and kind of relax and calm me. And I also meditate every morning for 35 minutes. I've been doing it for 8.5 years now. And
do you use any special app or anything like that, or did you use by yourself? Like, what's your meditation practice look like?
I'm heavily into Zen Buddhism, so I try and be as untechnological as possible. Although I do use the Insight. Let me see what it's called actually on my iPhone.
Sure.
It's Insight Timer.
Okay.
It's an app that has guided meditations and has a timer and bells and connects you to other people that's meditating. I find that helpful. But mostly my routine it is definitely a routine. I sit on these cushions in a lotus position, and it's all about emptying the mind completely and just completely focusing on the present and kind of becoming more self-aware, self-aware. So thoughts will intrude like, damn, why did my agent not return my email?
Yeah.
What's going on here? And I learned to like, why is that thought occurring? Maybe it's because I don't need to be constantly worrying about things that are not present at the moment. So it makes me question my emotions and make me look at who I am and and what's really going on. So I use that as the morning ritual to kind of get my day off to the right start, and kind of say, this is the morning and it's kind of got its own energy and I'm kind of excited by the day that's ahead of me. If I don't start the day with that meditation because something happens, and occasionally that's true, I feel totally out of whack. So those are two main hobbies of mine. It's a combination of things, but are you someone who's relatively flexible? Let's boil it down to that. And by flexible, that means you're willing to learn from experience. You're willing to admit your mistakes and challenge what you did in the past and adapt yourself to the present by saying, I'm not going to repeat that again. Are you fluid enough to get inside the spirit of every person that you deal with so that you're not treating them as if they were just all like all the other people you've dealt with? Are you fluid enough to get into their individual spirit? Are you adapting? Are you moving? Are you nimble? Are you learning from the new things that are coming up in your field? Are you constantly reading? And are you able to take criticism? So I would say it's being rigid and defensive and closed is the number one reason why people do not succeed. And being open and fluid and willing to learn and adapt is the number one reason why people really succeed. Now, there are some people who are successful who can start off life being very rigid in one track mind, and they can get pretty far. I've known people like that. They started a business. They're not very fluid, and they don't take criticism well, and yet they seem to be successful. But inevitably, those people don't last. They burn themselves out. I saw that with American Apparel, where I worked on the board of directors. So if you want to last, if you want to constantly be on an upward trajectory, I would say that flexibility and that open learning spirit is what separates the successful from the unsuccessful.